Welcome to another Candid Conversations. This is the pregame show with your hosts, Brenda Hetrick and Mark Gorman.
Mark and Brenda.
Mark and Brenda.
That's right, Brenda and Mark.
Brenda and Mark. I don't know which one comes first.
Well, you know how I'd like it to be.
Exactly. I don't want no comment.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, welcome to our, I will say, our last one of the year, because I don't think we're going to get another one in, prior to the end of the year.
True.
So we're ending the year on is the future bright for broadcast? So a tremendous topic. I think you're going to be on the panel, so I know you've got some thoughts on that. We've got a great panel to represent the industry. And what is the thinking? We've had a massive political, well, I would say the last few months of political maybe spend was up. We had an election.
We know here for those who may not know, Matrix is headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Which, if anyone knows anything, I think we had 250,000 visits from both presidential candidates.
Yep. We also had a Senate race here, we had a lot of visits, yes. And we had a lot of advertising.
We did.
I might still be able to verbatim say the ads, but let's not.
We're not taking any positions here. We just know that Connecticut Dave, we have this ad all the time.
Because that's what the ad said, right. But anyway, we just finished that. We have a new president, or we're going to have a new president. We have an election. We had an Olympics this year. We're not going to have an Olympics next year. We know about streaming. I mean, listen,
CTV,
all of this. So I think it's a great topic as to what is the future for local broadcasters, as far as how do they continue to grow their ad revenue while maintaining a competitive position with
Well, I think it's interesting. I'll say this because obviously we have the panel, and we don't want to have our own panel here.
That's right.
But I was asked the other day, or somebody said to me, how do you address the idea if somebody says to you TV is dead? And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And some of the thoughts, that I had, and we'll hear on the panel, but there's certainly different components of traditional television between the cable nets, local television, the networks, and how does each compete. And I do think local, this is my personal position, has a unique offering in the sense of how its distribution occurs. We'll leave it at that. We'll move on. I know, let's get out of television for a minute. We know it's been actually a couple of big movies have hit the market. I know you've seen both Gladiator and
Wicked, or as they say, Glicked, I think, or Glicket, or something like that, like Barbenheimer from last year.
Okay.
And Moana. Which I have Moana too, which I have not seen, but have heard tremendous.
Oh, I've heard it's not good.
Oh, I know it's getting great numbers. What I found interesting is because there has been there were reasons, right? We had the pandemic, and there were reasons why movies were not released in the theater. But according to Gladiator and Wicked both were the weekend, I think, before Thanksgiving, but between like that weekend and then like this weekend, the largest numbers of people going to the theater. Now, Thanksgiving fell, later in the year, and there was the weekend. So I do, as someone who loves to go to the movies, to the theater, I do love that those numbers are back. And I'm not, will Netflix change and put everything in the theater? Probably not, but
they've got Hot Frosty.
Yeah. But
which I've never heard. Have you heard of Hot Frosty?
I have, but
So it's actually interesting. So I heard of Hot Frosty over Thanksgiving. My nephew mentioned it to me. He's like, it was a terrible movie, et cetera, et cetera. So I looked it up, and it got like an 85% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
And he was shocked. He's like, how is that even possible?
Yes.
Yet the audience review on Rotten Tomatoes was significantly lower, which I thought was interesting. I have not seen Hot Frosty, nor do I anticipate watching it.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard.
I've seen Wicked.
Right. And I thought Wicked was fantastic, and I think it's the Golden Globes, some awards were announced, and I didn't see Gladiator in there, but I did like Gladiator too a lot. Listen, the lead is a very good looking man, so I like Gladiator too.
Did you like Gladiator 2
better than one?
or did you like Gladiator 2?
Yeah.
The number, or did you mean as well?
I liked Gladiator 2 better than 1. However,
Wow.
my small subset of people who attended with me, I was the only one of 6 people. I was the only one that liked 2 better. I think because it was fresh, like, it's like more like in your mind, like the Gladiator 1 was, but listen.
But didn't you watch Gladiator?
We did the night before, just to refresh our memory. So, but that's good news, right? And then I throw Moana in there too, because I think Moana 2 in there as well, because it's good to know those are, and of course, and listen, we are located in Pittsburgh. I'm a native Pittsburgher. Someone here is a native Philly person, and this weekend, live sports, there's the Battle of Pennsylvania. My Steelers are playing your Eagles, and so live sports clearly drive a lot of we talk about a political.
So who do you think's going to win that game?
The Steelers. Come
Would you like to?
Yeah, of course.
What do you say?
$5.
$5. $20. There you go.
My Steelers are gonna.
I think we're 10-2.
I think we are too.
Are you?
Well, we might be 9-3.
Okay.
But anywho, our trajectory is going up. The Eagles are coming back.
I mean, ours is really. I mean, we've lost 2 games.
Yeah, well, we've won 3. Please, come on. Anywho, we also know live sports drives a lot of interest in the local market. So, but I would be remiss if I wouldn't have said that game is going to be played this Sunday. And so anyone who's interested, depending on who wins, one of us will be happy and one of us will be not so happy.
Well, I'm really forget about this game. My dream, which I think is a potential reality this year, or let's say 2025 early, a Turnpike Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, the Turnpike is the name of the highway that that connects Philly to Pittsburgh. I think it also costs in tolls something like $60.
No.
It's a very expensive to cross the state on the highway.
But it does. Where would we have it though? Harrisburg?
No, it's going to be somewhere warm, but
right. We couldn't.
But I mean, just the idea that you would have it, I think it's kind of like if you have the Mets and the Yankees, but
somewhere
in a better state, that's more exciting.
Yeah, that in February has temperatures in the 80s and no snow. So what else is going on? What's new for you? Parent events? Are you ready for Christmas? Are you planning a vacation? I know you typically vacation at the end of the year, but
we don't. No, normally we do it the week before Christmas.
Yep.
So for those of you who don't know this rule, the week before Christmas is a great time to go on vacation because no one travels, so everything is usually 50% off. Let's just say I'd like to save money if I can, and there's no kids. So if you're looking for a childless vacation, that's a great time to go because no one is taking their kids the week before the holidays.
You're not going to Disney then.
Absolutely. But no vacation. We're doing Mexico in March, and then we have a family reunion every year or every 3 years, which so we have our family reunion this August, so that's pretty much my year. What about you? You don't take vacations?
Not that often, no. I am on vacation some, but not although this year or 25 because I did watch the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral, and last time I was in Paris it was like 2 months after it had caught on fire, so I did not get to see it then.
Yeah.
And I would love to go and see it. So and if we can potentially tie in the French Open, is on my list for. I also have someone in my traveling group who wants to see an F1 race. But we'll
I mean, I think that would be fun. But guess what? We're already at time.
I know.
Thank you for joining us on the pregame. And Caitlin, feel free to hit it.
Wow, who didn't get chills listening to that? Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Hanlon. I am the founder of the Vertere Group in Chicago. We advise and consult a ton of clients in the media and advertising and marketing spaces, lots of technology in the midst. And it is my pleasure to join you for the last, for this year, Matrix Media Candid Conversations. We normally would be having conversations like these in person. We did it last year, and we're honored to have a few of the folks that were in the room with us last year, as well as some new faces for this conversation around local television and local media. What is ongoing now, and maybe a little bit of crystal ball predictions as to what 2025 looks like, and lots of uncertainties, let's put it that way, as the sort of theme for this conversation. So let's bring in our three panelists, and these are folks with excellent viewpoints from different sort of perspectives in the local television, local media space, and I think well suited to have a conversation around what's going on now and what the heck's going to go on in the next number of months in the short-term future of 2025 as we approach the end of this year already. Becky, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're from, and for those folks who don't already know who you are.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks for having me, Matrix. My name is Becky Meyers. I'm the Senior Vice President of National Sales for Gray Television.
Excellent. Andrew, welcome to the proceedings. Who are you?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Privileged to be here. I am the CEO of the New York Interconnect. So effectively, all of the large majority of the cable inventory for any provider in the New York DMA.
Excellent. And a previous experience in places like Google, correct?
Yep. I spent 8.5 years at Google, and leading the telecom practice, CRO of Waves, and some sales excellence. And then I worked at NBC for 8.5 years on the local Olympic side, and some sports before that. So a career all in and around this place, and still a passion and love for local.
Excellent. And last but not least, Sir Mark.
Passion and love. I love it. I'm Mark Gorman, CEO of Matrix Solutions. We provide an ad revenue management system for primarily local broadcast, but we do have products for national network, digital, addressable, etc. And more importantly, I'm of pre-game Candid conversation fame.
Well, let's use that pregame banter that you and Brenda had just a few minutes earlier to kind of set us up here. I kind of want to balance this conversation between sort of the issues that we sort of see at the moment as we record this in the middle part of December of 2024, and then sort of gear shift into what we collectively or individually think is on the horizon, both in the weeks ahead and maybe the months as 2025 unfolds. And I guess I'll start with just an open-ended question around, we're now sitting in a post-election lull period, certainly when it comes to the advertising spend. The money has been absorbed, in theory counted and accounted for by many accounts. The deluge of political advertising spend occurred right on schedule, and perhaps in certain cases maybe even more so than people expected. But now we're in the lull. All that money has been spent, and I guess I'd like to hear from your individual perspectives. What are you in your hallways and in your colleagues around you? What is the mood right this moment? Is it are we kind of worried about where the dollars are going to be coming from going forward, or just a real sort of a take on where sort of people feel right now after having gone through a pretty significant election season? Don't be shy.
I think that right now we're laser focused on 2025 business. It's always interesting to see what is going. Many advertisers, we've scared them away during an election year, because it's just the crowd out is real, particularly as you were talking about in the pregame in Pennsylvania. And I think right now we're laser focused on the business that is coming back into the local marketplace for 2025. I think some obvious categories are going to see some decline, but we're also having some new advertisers coming to the, as in TikTok or Paramount, or people that weren't spending money in local to drive viewership to their platform. So I think back in the day, I don't want to use the word lazy, or, you could miss a piece of business and you could make it up on another piece of business. We don't have that luxury any longer. You've got to hit it with everything that's coming your way when it's coming. And I'm encouraged by already in 2025, some rebounded activity that they stayed away in 2024, as well as some new advertisers that are coming to the plate.
So quickly, Becky, can you give us a sense of what that sort of crowd out dynamic is for those who are sort of unaware really of what that means? Essentially, it's political advertising is so voluminous and has to be handled in a legally contrived manner that there literally is just no inventory. And there's obviously things that go on to either make more inventory, that kind of stuff. But maybe it's going to describe the fear factor that people have when they're not a political advertiser, or that they may just not even make the call because they recognize that they might not have a shot at getting some airtime.
I think such a high percentage of the campaign spend happens between Labor Day and Election Day. That's historically been the pattern, and it was really no different this year. That October in specific markets, you have legal rules and regulations that you have to follow with the politicians or the PAC groups that come in, and it's just making space for as many people at the inn as you possibly can. And luckily for Gray, we have such a unique footprint where I think almost 90% of our markets are either number one or number two in their marketplaces. So we've been dealing with this crowd out issue for many, many years, in many, many cycles. I think our stations in our local markets are excellent at finding the balance, but I think there are plenty of advertisers that just say, let's just stay quiet and look at other ways to reach our customers during September, October.
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword, right? Because to the Wall Street community, right, this is, you have stations in smaller markets that are dominant, that tend to attract most of the ad dollars, especially in competitive markets, yet those other advertisers have a hard time accessing, right? So it's almost it's a very interesting conundrum, right, that local broadcasting in particular has. Andrew, how about you on the sort of cable and interconnect side of things? What's the feeling in your world, both politically and quote unquote apolitically, shall we say?
Yeah. So first of all, again, thanks for having me. I mean, look, there's sub decline, right? So when everyone's sort of the elephant in the room, I don't want to not recognize that there's pressure on cable subs, right? That's absolutely a thing. But it's sort of being bolstered by the MVPDs have unbelievable access to streaming inventory, both their own, where they're converting subs to app-based, and or all the streaming aggregation they have on their own platforms, and sort of the quality that we can bring to market of O&O content, where it's not sort of poisoned all by third party, makes the streaming assets we have incredibly compelling. A. B, to answer your question about political, first of all, if you look at the New York market, and again, this is unique to New York, but A, we're three markets, right? We're three states. B, this wasn't particularly competitive from a presidential perspective. So we didn't see really any presidential monies come in. All we saw was a bunch of congressional districts. And I look at 25 as not much of a letdown, because I got a gubernatorial in New Jersey, which is a massive race. I got a mayoral in New York. So I think, the notion of political being so, such fluctuations is a little less relevant for my market. I also think what Becky said is correct, right? You're seeing a lot of new advertisers. The irony is people tell me all day long, Google and where I worked, and and Meta, Amazon, these people are going to eat my lunch. Well, these are the biggest TV advertisers in the world right now, right? Google, I believe, is number one, right? So we're actually you see the flight to quality of a linear product. And and sports is there as well. So I'm a lot more bullish probably than I should be, because I see our results not, we're cutting way against the grain from a sub loss perspective. Recognize the challenges, but I feel like we're in great shape in terms of our evolution and repping the right inventory for the right customer. So the glacier melts, but it does so, I think, in more Hyman Roth, to make a Godfather reference, fashion of the same heart attack for 20 years versus instantaneous.
So, Tim, if I
Great
can jump
analogy.
in,
Go ahead, Mark. Yeah, please.
because I think about this too. So we've actually, as you might know, we have a number of clients in this field, and really starting at the end of, I guess, the bounce back from COVID, we started doing a lot of analysis on financial performance of each one of our clients and overlaid that on how they're managing their sales teams. And so what we've really seen, and when I say this, the difference in local broadcast performance between good and bad is about 56%. So it's actually much larger than you would anticipate. And our belief is, when we look at the broadcasters that are doing significantly better from advertising revenue, they've developed, and this is really goes to Becky's point, they've become much more disciplined in how they're executing sales. There's not that laissez-faire attitude of it's just going to come to me, I'll just wait here, answer a few RFPs, and I'm done. Those groups that have become much more disciplined, you see it in their underlying performance. And listen, they have to be, because local is actually not necessarily losing revenue. Maybe it's not growing like other parts, but I think I saw BIA Kelsey for 2025 expects local to continue to grow revenue, though of course most of it is going to CTV, the growth, rather than traditional linear. But that does mean the profit margins do get hit, right? The executing on OTT is significantly more expensive. And so by being more disciplined, they're able to extract better returns. And we just see it. We call it a CRM renaissance, because part of what we offer in our tool is CRM, but we've seen some groups really take that and be disciplined, and then other groups aren't, and they're just not seeing the same performance.
Well, what I'm hearing in all three of your comments is that the quality standout of local broadcast, local cable is still very much a thing, right? In a sea of everything being a choice, all kinds of streaming options, and again, another elephant in the room. Obviously there's a gigantic set of eyeballs that are starting their television or video journeys by streaming first, right? And not even including, right, certainly younger audiences. But as Andrew hinted at, and the others you guys have also spoken to, there is something to be said for that programming quality that does stand out, that the durability of such things as local news, and increasingly, again, everything old is new again, local sports, taking on some of the shards, shall we say, of a broken RSN system. So let me sort of couch this second question to all of you as a jump ball question. What is the mindset right now of the content pipes, if you will, of what's driving the ad attractiveness, both in terms of news, in terms of sports, in terms of other programming? Are we kind of in the midst of really kind of just regaining the same kind of mix of content, or are there real conversations going on about how to maybe evolve what the programming mix looks like versus, cookie cutter news and a couple of live sports things, right? Because syndication, what does that mean anymore? I mean, there's a lot of things that seem to be changing in sort of the quality of what local programming sort of brings to bear. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the programming side of things.
I'll start this one out. And I think, you've seen a lot of marketers go through a cycle of buying programmatically, sort of hyper fragmentation of where they're trying to buy audiences in different programming. Having worked at Google for a long time, buying influencers on YouTube and et cetera. And all of this was sort of couched in the notion of better data and more efficiency. But what you're sort of seeing them experience is a lot of walled garden data that's tough to sort of understand reach and frequency and attribution together. A lot of effort to get any real branding or upper funnel because you sort of this a million options, and I think it becomes exhausting, right? And sadly they've wanted to get rid of people because they thought that they would and this would be easier, but they're not having the perfect outcome there, right? So you're seeing people reconsider, okay, maybe we actually do need to buy broader reach that's more ownership oriented and at least create a balance there. And I think, quality of programming is important, right? I mean, there's, it's sort of, it's taken a dive, right? So that's why I keep using the expression flight to quality. So I think there's a sort of a cyclical thing happening here. Now, that remains to be seen where that plays out over the next 3 to 5 years. But certainly, to Becky's point earlier, you're seeing advertisers come back that I frankly thought might go away, and they're returning.
So buying audience, right, so to speak, right, which is a hallmark of streaming for sure, and certainly very programmatically driven, right, versus that of the quality thing, the contextual relevance of programming, understanding and being sort of deferential in places like news and sports and other maybe local programming hooks and stuff, where it's more about the environment that you're in viewing wise versus just you happen to be in the right zip+4 cluster, right?
Yeah, and just so let me answer one quick. So buying audience is awesome, but it's usually for programmers that have content that's decent but not great. Like, no one's selling the NFL in fragmenting spots and all those impressions, right? It's just not going to happen. So I think that there's a false sense of security about pure audience-based buying for marketers. They're not going to get ultra premium, so it's a watch out, right? And I caution against that.
So Becky, Mark, translate that for me in terms of local programming then, right? Obviously, in the case of broadcasting, right, there's national networks, national sports, like Andrew's talking about, but also there's local programming too. How does that contextual relevance and attractiveness, if you will, play a role in how programming decisioning is made so that advertising can be made more, shall we say, valuable and more and pricier, shall we say, for advertisers to take advantage of?
Well, I'll start, Mark. I think that, first of all, local broadcasters have a unique position where their destiny depends on the service to the local marketplace. If you've got a hurricane bearing down wherever you live, you're not going to Google it. You're not going to, look at a national news, outlet for information. You're going to go local to your television or radio, whatever your choice is. So I think that opportunity is our secret sauce because we already have those connections. We have those relationships that were built many, many years ago. And I do think there is a, you could kind of have, and as I mentioned before, the unique footprint that we have where we would joke where you could put color bars up on a certain station and they would still get viewers, filling in the diaries. Now I think people are highly educated. They know what they want. They want non-skewed, fair and balanced, both sides of the information brought to them, and they want the story that connects them to the larger story in their local marketplaces. So I think a lot of you see some station groups that are reducing newscasts, and I think we're in the position to double down in many of our markets and provide more news than we've ever provided before, as well as we've seen significant success with our lifestyle shows that reach the local consumer with a local advertiser, because local people buy products and services. It's not, it all happens on the local level, no matter who you are, buying Charmin toilet paper or going to to an Applebee's restaurant. So I think we have a responsibility and an opportunity to hone those relationships and bring better quality programming that is locally curated.
Well, I guess I'll just add my 2 cents, and I think there's 2 components, right? There's the component of, I would call it branding versus call to action on the marketing front. And when people are advertising on local, to me, yes, there is there is a certain, I don't know if you would call it prestige, but certain mark of quality if you're on the news. But I would argue if you're on local television, you get some of that period, even if you're showing up. I don't even know if this is still on, but Jerry Springer and reruns. There is a certain level of, oh, that's something I can trust versus something I'm getting on a YouTube video or on streaming that comes in mid-roll. It just, there's a different level of perception as to that quality. As far as picking content, I'm certainly not in that business, but what I would say is, I think it's pretty much a known fact that Americans trust their local news more than any other news organization in this country. That's just a fact. And now I'm going to jump ahead and then I'll leave it in that if we do get rid of the caps and local broadcasters are able to expand, merge, grow, I think there's an opportunity for them to really take over the #1 spot in news, not just on the local, but also on a national front, where they could combine the trust and brand recognition on local with the ability to cover national in a way that I think most other news organizations today have lost.
Well, let's use that as a gear shift, right? Because I think it's almost baked in now at this point, just a few weeks after the election, of this unbridled enthusiasm and expectation that the rules are going to come down and there are going to be no more guardrails. We'll see, right? But it's clear a lot of people are expecting that there's going to be a lot more rethought and loosening, shall we say, of things like the 39% exposure cap for one station group to own, the idea of cross ownership between a quote unquote newspaper, whatever that is, and a television station, the top station signals in a market and the concentration of restrictions on perhaps a station group owning more than one station signal in a marketplace, local marketing agreements and reseller agreements and all those kinds of things. I think that's all wrapped up in an overall rethink of what broadcasting and cable, whatever those are, and the acts that oversee them, right? So I think it's a very bipartisan understanding that the mechanisms by which we regulate quote unquote media have to be rethought maybe 30 years on since the Cable Act, right? But all that said, I'm curious to hear your respective opinions on what the loosening, some of those loosenings might indeed mean. Because Mark, to your point, I don't disagree, right? I think the idea of a larger and more vibrant and maybe more voluminous local news operation makes a ton of sense and could be much more valuable going forward. But the argument could also be countered by, well, isn't that just going to be an invitation to possibly centralize news operations and maybe not have more local news and actually more centralized stuff with less local newsrooms, right?
It could be, but here's how I look at it. So I think there's a lot of things baked in your question. On the one side, I think from getting rid of the rules, if you really want to say that big tech needs a competitor, you better start thinking how you're going to do that, because big tech has taken over media, right? And in the sense of eyeballs, etc. But traditional media can be a formidable competitor. Now, with the centralization, I don't know. I'm going to just use this as an example. This is what I do. I have not had this conversation with Perry Nexstar, but I think of somebody like a Nexstar who would have local news at their affiliates, but also owns News Nation, and would have the ability to potentially combine those efforts still to give local news and get the benefits. Okay, maybe if you're in a super, super small market, unless you own every station in that market, it's just not economical to have news. Yeah, maybe you do see some watering down, but I would argue in the medium-sized markets, it's still worth it to keep those local. It's still a profitable venture, and if you're making money there, and then you're combining it with your national, like a News Nation, I just think it's a powerhouse that you are just going to drive those local viewers into your national viewing news, and it's going to be synergistic rather than taking away from each other. That's my opinion.
I think there's a lot of synergies to be had with what potentially could happen. And I don't want to comment on, either our company or another company's potential. We could pontificate, I think, all day long.
Understood.
I think the one thing that everybody agrees upon is the rules are old and the rules are antiquated and they don't fit in today's economy and they don't make sense. And it's made it more difficult for local ownership groups to expand, because if you don't have a News Nation, I mean, we've got Local News Live. I think everybody's kind of got their national piece of news and information that can be fed both ways. I think any changes would be positive because I can speak for our company. We were on a M&A tear for a lot of years, and in all of those markets where we have many markets where we have multiple affiliations, I think our ownership has only brought enhancements to the local news marketplace to give them more choices and more hours to potentially choose from to watch.
Andrew, I really like to hear your opinion from a competitive standpoint, and then I want to ask you a follow-up question after your take on that from where you sit regarding loosened broadcast regulations, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this more as a human being who's worked in media than I am as a cable exec per se. I mean,
you can't be two of this. You can't be one and the same, huh? Okay.
Fair enough. It's a bit scary to me. I mean, I do think that the reason those regulations were in place was to stop, sort of manipulation of people, right? I mean, a lot of people will just sort of do what they're told, and I think those rules were set up in some regard to provide diversity of perspective. Unfortunately, that's moved more towards polarity than it has diversity, right? And I think that's sort of the problem we're in. A, B, you've got an administration that's got 4 years to do what it's going to do. But, within the way the world works now, it's sort of 2 years and then you're recampaigning again, right? So I'm not quite certain it's enough time to, see drastic change in that regard. Plus the economics have to work for companies and, debt is hard to come by or it's expensive right now. So I'm not quite certain how if the M&A market moves that fast. But yeah, I mean, it's very possible you're going to see some moves there and some deregulation. But I don't know how fast it is. And I'm a bit worried about what that actually means for people. But, that's why I said I would answer it more on a human level than I would from an exec perspective.
So let me ask you this follow-up, Andrew, and then I want to corral Becky into this follow-up as well. For ever since the cable regulatory schema was essentially put into place and codified in the early to mid 1990s, there has been on the local level this sort of a whole signal thing in the broadcast realm, meaning, your quote unquote 2 minutes an hour that you provide in an interconnect environment or local cable providers have been providing and or aggregating, right, sits in these national network pools of inventory and never are crossed into the local broadcast, right? I guess the question in there, and this is assuming, and it's very whiteboarding here, but I think logically, there's definitely a thinking that why not finally put the power of sub-DMA targeting via a cable pipe or whatever that internet provided evolution of such is, together with that of the local broadcast inventory, and harmonize those two things, not unlike other sub-DMA targetable advertising environments at the local level that exist. I'd love to hear your opinion about that, and maybe Becky, you've got one too, or maybe I'm just dreaming
Tim, I think,
here.
Look, I mean, if you look at a local broadcast station, Becky, you can speak to this. Like they're selling OTT impressions, right, wherever they want, right? So it's already happened, right? We're talking about a vestige of regulatory that that one concerns me less, right? I mean, what you're looking for in these markets is who is the best most compelling, frankly, sales team to bring the best assets to customers across, whatever programming is available. And that's probably how it should be. Frankly, we sell, for the most part, we're selling our own assets, but we do also represent other assets where need be that aren't O&O, only if it doesn't compete with what we have. So I think that's a vestige, Tim, and I do see that going the other way, unlike the news thing where I get a little bit more worried about humanity. I mean, it's already happening, right?
Agreed. I mean, and I think that I hate when broadcasters get backed in or put in one bucket where we're just linear, or same goes for you, Andrew. Like, we do it all. We can, there's certainly different margins, as you mentioned before, on the business. If we sell OTT, we sell, mobile, we sell desktop, we can put your commercial wherever our viewer is, and we have to make sure that we are everywhere that viewer wants us to be, no matter where it is, because very few people are watching the thing that's hanging on the wall in their house anymore. As far as getting content, it looks different.
And can I just follow up to that? Because Becky's right there. I mean, I think one pitfall of all the, whether it's broadcast or cable, is the notion that an OTT or streaming viewer is going to deliver the CPMs you want, right? It's just not going to happen. So what's happening is and most of those impressions are, we add in third party or people add in third party. So what you're doing is you're then trying to compete with YouTube at a really low CPM. And by the way, having worked there, and I love Google, but they're now selling a product called Performance Max, which is effectively a black box, so they can monetize the heck out of their long tail impressions on YouTube, which are billions and billions and billions based on an outcome. So they can basically sell you a 5-cent CPM forever until you get the outcome you want, right? So this isn't, streaming for us is a delivery vehicle and a place to show attribution, etc. But it is based on premium product and premium programming, not something someone makes in their home. And as long as there's still value to sports and local TV, etc., we need to balance that transition and include it with linear, not just go whole hog and cede control to the whims of programmatic, where you just can't get quality, you can't really focus. Sorry, I don't want to be preachy, but I do think that's a thing, and it's important to note.
I agree. I'm glad you said it.
So let's keep going in the streaming direction, because I do think the form factors matter, right? And I think a lot of people sort of struggle with on all sides of the equation is, what is quote unquote local streaming, right? So from an advertising perspective, right, the idea of being able to target local ZIP+4 clusters, or add in or represent aggregated inventory from other sources like the Premions and the Mad Hives of the world and that kind of stuff, add-ons, if you will, to linear buys, both cable and broadcast for that matter. But I'm also really interested about sort of what the form factor is for local streaming as a product, right? Because I think it's pretty clear in this day and age, a lot of the quote unquote local television conversation is still very much rooted in, we know the economics and the relatively good economics of linear television, right? The streaming thing, right, is less attractive, shall we say, in the aggregate, and it shows, frankly, in terms of what the content is, right? I mean, there's also a lot of different idiosyncrasies to it, right? Local broadcast stations really can only go so far in what they can stream to consumers, because they're restricted by their affiliate relationships and their networks, right? Cable, on the cable front too, right? Your cable networks, not unlike the broadcast television networks, are putting a lot of their prime stuff, shall we say, on streaming, either simultaneously or first or very close thereafter a broadcast, right? So the value of the live linear presentation thing is also somehow getting sort of pushed over to streaming. The question in there is, what of local plus streaming? What does that future look like beyond just news, or maybe it is just news? Are there other things that could be brought to the bear? What is the future of local streaming advertising beyond being one of a number of folks trying to aggregate other forms of inventory and package them up as an adjunct to a linear buy, right? There's a lot of murkiness to what local and streaming looks like. I'm really interested to hear what you think the next number of months look like for that dynamic.
I can start. I
Please.
think that local streaming, I look at it almost as our audience extension, and that you've got your main impressions that you're delivering via traditional ways. And then you're streaming, I mean, news and sports is where it's at. And those are two two pieces of programming that people want immediately or close to the actual, production time. So I think we are limited with what networks we can sell into the sports streaming, but we also have a lot of local relationships with teams like the Phoenix Suns, the Pelicans, and we're creating, some of these RSNs across the country that I think is going to be very niche and to build a campaign on. I think it's very difficult. And the one thing that local broadcasters need to remember, we're the megaphone, and I keep saying it, like, don't try to be something that you're not. Like, you give up your specialness of the megaphone if you try to target, this little area of people here sitting in this group. So I look at it as an audience extension at this point in time.
So that's
So-
interesting. Let me quickly follow up. The gray approach, right? It almost feels like there's a regionalization of some of these local streams. For example, on the backs of, say, a sports team that has a regional kind of component to it, like the Peachtree thing, or these. It's actually almost like a syndication play where you can actually aggregate, instead of just the local streams of news, create your own little regionality to your streams, which I think is, maybe you're onto something there, right?
Hopefully.
Sorry.
We'll see where it goes, but I think right now the first step is bringing these sporting events to free viewer. If nobody has to pay to watch these sporting events. Go ahead, Mark.
So the thing is you said something that I think is key, Becky. The issue, I think, from a streaming perspective that you have today is on sports. And I mean, I'll use myself as an example. I detest seeing a sport event after it's done. It's like I want to be there for it. Now, sometimes I do watch it in streaming versus on live TV because that's all I have access to. So I do think it's a mode of access. Becky had mentioned, they're doing some of these lifestyle branding, et cetera. I'm always of the belief that local has something no one else has, right? Netflix, ABC, all those groups are literally identical. They're national. They have to compete on content and ease of access. That's it. But local is in their local communities, and that's why people trust their news. I still think there's an opportunity that I believe is untapped and I don't know what it is. I'm not a creative person, but somehow starting to come up with, and you could do it on a regional basis or a local basis if the market's big enough, but where you develop programming that local people, particularly younger local people, want to watch. And I think, what is it today? 18+% of US households now have free antennas. So I know that's not streaming, but as people have cut the cord, which I think they say is decreasing the cutting, there are a number of people who say, you know what, I have streaming, and I'm going to say that I am one of these people. I have streaming, I use Sling, and then I have an antenna so that I can pick up my local TV stations.
That sounds onerous.
Sorry.
Yes, it does.
But like, I think, look, follow the money. And then, if people say to me all the time, is Amazon going to kill you? I'm going to say, well, it's interesting. Amazon, go buy NFL on Amazon programmatically. Not possible. Why? They're paying a fortune for it. Who have they hired to sell it locally? Me. So, and I think you see that, these the whatever streamers that they're paying all this money for the content everybody wants to watch. They need to monetize that way beyond programmatic, right? So, Becky's got a killer sales staff across a gajillion markets. Her people are experts in representing the local market. They know it well. You know, there is a world where Gray or the Interconnect, whoever, we are the most effective, you know, go-to-market sales teams there are. So I think when people talk about the death of these organizations, they think about the straight line content they were selling versus the local expertise and how they represent the local community. And I think that to me is the sort of the where the recoalescing happens. You know, it may not be in terms of where the inventory is streamed, but when you've got expensive things and local expertise, like I think there's a world where that works.
So I think that's a very good point. And I want to end, we're near the end of our time, but I do want to ask sort of that question is maybe how you sort of envision that sort of coming to play, because it does reek of partnership and or collaboration, so to speak, right? We talked about this during our prep call, right? You know, the black or white of it is, right, you know, you can think about it as, you know, a zero-sum game where these national streamers like the Netflixes of the world literally just go downstream, quote unquote, tackle the local base by just saying, give us your ZIP+4 clusters and we'll make sure that we find that audience for you regardless, right? And that, of course, completely discounts what we just talked about earlier, the relevance of local content, the contextual relevance, all that kind of stuff, right? But then there's the flip side, right? These local markets, these local areas of expertise that the two and a half of you essentially bring to the table, right? Where there is value and quality and understanding of local markets and the people involved and all that stuff, right? Where there's the ability to go, if you will, upstream into those environments, right? I think the real fun and interesting stuff, good and bad, and maybe who knows, is in that middle, that gooey center where the national and the local frame together and come together somehow. Just one little example, right, Andrew, as I mentioned before, could be the cable pipe and the local broadcaster interconnecting themselves, so to speak, right? But I got to think there are other ways too, especially in streaming. Am I the only one that thinks that there's some hope to that possibility for mutual benefit there?
I hope, as you do, that there can be more collaboration with partners to bring the programming to the audience. I have heard that across the last couple of months from people not deep in our business, like we've all been in it for so long, but outside of it, saying you guys can't be frenemies anymore. You have to be real friends. And you know, putting what it looks like, I do not know. And that's hopefully some of the potential changes in Washington may allow for future collaboration where, you know, high tides rise all boats is how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, look, consumer protections are supposed to be put in place just for that reason, right? To protect folks from often, you know, pricing inefficiencies or gouging. I do think, as I mentioned before, yeah, I got to be careful. Well, the word news has been corrupted in and of itself, right? You got to be careful in this space because we hold a very powerful and mantle that if you look at other countries around the world where you're getting single source information that's state run, like that's not a good thing. So diversity of thought and perspective and those protections, I think, are valuable. Should we, as long as we're respectful of that, there is absolutely no reason we can't cross those lines. And I think ultimately customers will benefit from that. And then back to your other point, Tim, when you talk about the GUI center, et cetera, the notion of full funnel advertising, like DR has been around forever, right? So you move streaming out of the way, people could be buying the bottom of the barrel forever, right? This just because the medium shifts doesn't mean the strategy changes. It seems as though everyone thought, oh, they're streaming now, we won't have to pay for good content anymore. Well, you touch the fire and you realize it's hot, and I think we're kind of going in that direction. Does it mean everyone's going to sign up for cable? No. But does it mean that there is a more thoughtful approach, and there will be, and that's an opportunity for sure.
So Tim, I'll just add my 2 cents. I think it will be a reality, but maybe not through collaboration, but through the realities of the market. So, I'm a capitalist by background. You look at buying on a local or regional level. Okay, maybe if you're a bigger company, you're comfortable executing those buys on different platforms. But in a local community, your local broadcaster is really your agency, right? They're the people helping you figure out how I want to get my ads out there, how I want to target and where I want to go. And I think ultimately groups like Netflix, et cetera, Amazon, they'll realize they're killing themselves on trying to make this programmatic and it's not worth it. And those third-party extension products of Amazon and Netflix, et cetera, are going to be sold by Becky and her team as part of a full-on package. And I think that's actually great because the local broadcaster not only will they be selling as they already do this today, but I think their portfolio is just going to continue to expand, and they are going to be the conduit for local companies to, and listen, I'm not talking about Matrix, I'm involved in other companies, and I know how that works. I mean, you're really relying on these people to be your experts at the local stations to help you figure out how you're doing your targeting.
Okay, last question, and I'm going to put you all on the spot here. 1 minute tops, and thank you all. This has been enlightening for me for sure, hopefully for the audience as well. Just like to hear your personal thoughts on what you're concerned about and maybe one thing that you're excited about as we turn the page on a new year full of uncertainty. I prefer an answer for both of them if you could. But if you just want to focus on one area, that's okay too. But something that keeps you up at night, or that you're concerned or worried, or you're spending a lot of time and attention on that you'd like to solve better. The other thing being maybe something that you are just unabashedly excited about and can't wait for the page to turn for the new year.
Well, I'll start. I mean,
Please do.
I think fragmenting is certainly a concern for all of us, and being able to have enough of the puzzle pieces to bring them to the advertiser that needs to be successful and move products and services. And how do we do that? Because that audience is evolving and changing, and what is the right mix going forward into 2025? I'm super excited that Missouri finally passed sports gambling, so we'll have another intro there for our markets in Missouri. And I'm always excited about change. It's super scary. It feels sometimes terrifying, but I've been in the business over 34 years, and this is maybe the fifth, sixth, seventh death threat that local linear has had. I remember calling my father in 1990 saying, I might have made a mistake because people are saying that this business is going away. That was a very long time. It's not going away. It's going to evolve and change. And I think we all need to be excited about it and embrace it.
Excellent points. Thank you, Becky.
Yeah. I think what I'm scared of and what I'm excited about is sort of the same, right? I mean, to Becky's point, fragmentation, isn't good for anyone. And it's especially not good for content, which is a pillar of why this business works, right? You need good content for people to want to watch, for advertisers to want to build their brands in. And the more fragmented we are from a streaming perspective, the more expensive it is for consumers, and the lower the investment is in programming. Streamers can't take as many risks as they used to, right? They're starting to pare that back. Broadcast networks can't take as many programming risks, et cetera. So lower quality content is a risk. But conversely, as I said before, I think you're starting to see all these streamers realize that to monetize effectively, they need to be locally relevant. And so that presents a tremendous opportunity for the likes of the New York Interconnect, for the MVPDs, and for local broadcast. So I think they're sort of one and the same. And I hope that, I hope they end in a good place. The last thing I'll say is I think there's a responsibility on all of us to make sure that sort of freedom of speech is protected in the next X years, and not and that's on us in terms of how we operate our businesses.
Beautiful.
So I guess I'll round out. I'll say
Please.
I'm going to start with what I'm excited about because I tend to be an optimist. So they always say you start, at least I pretend to be one. It's my self-perception. Like always, I always go into every new year and every new quarter excited about the potential for opportunity. And I do think there are opportunities when we look at how we as an organization can help our clients through thinking about things differently, and about really helping them understand where their strengths are and where their vulnerabilities are. And if we can focus on that as an organization and start to help our clients understand that, we can help them flourish. What I am concerned about on an industry level is, and as I said there's a real dichotomy across our client base. There's some people who have done and really taken steps to change. And there's other people I see there and I think, oh my God, it's like, what are you doing? You're literally acting like it's 1980 and you're running the business the same and you're making these changes to things that aren't going to impact your business at all. So sometimes I get concerned that some of our clients, they focus, I mean, this is of course my opinion, but I think they focus on things that aren't going to have any impact on their business whatsoever. And if you're not changing, if you're not adapting, I think Becky said it best. I mean, this industry isn't going to go away. It is going to evolve and it's going to change. And when there's evolution, there's winners and there's losers. And so I am concerned for those groups that are not making the necessary changes they should be, because they will be the losers.
Well, nobody has lost in this conversation. We are all winners, and I think I'm the chief among them for all the insights that you guys have provided. I want to thank each of you for taking time, and a little bit more than our allotted time. But this is a quality conversation. Already seeing some commentary that underlines that. I also want to thank in the background people who are here and not here: Deanna, Brenda, Liz, Caitlin, and Shannon. Thank you all for helping put all of this together. And I want to thank the folks at Matrix in particular. Mark, thank you for allowing me to facilitate this conversation. I wish you all, both online as well as on our panel, a wonderful holiday season, a happy new year, and let's hope that it is more positive than negative. And I reserve the right to come back and assemble you all again to talk about how it's going, if given the opportunity. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching, and I appreciate all the participation as well. Thank you.